and I'm going to talk about how photographers capture wildlife. Now, a lot of people, especially pro photographers, are the best at capturing the best pictures of wildlife. And that's not because necessarily they're extremely good with the camera. It's because they have a lot of other things too. They have a lot of time, they have a lot of places where they can travel, they know where to find the wildlife, and they're also good with the camera, and they have good equipment. Most of us don't have the time to search for this wildlife or have the money to travel to the places where these exotic wildlife are. Traveling out of the U.S. to places like South America, Africa, or Antarctica is very difficult for some of us, and I know I've never been into any of those places, although I would love to go someday. So basically what we can do is capture the wildlife here that we have in the USA. And a good place to capture those wildlife are actually in places like national parks, like Glacier National Park where I am right now. In Glacier National Park you see a lot of things like deer, elk, bears, and great horned sheep. And you can find these things almost every day. You'll see a new thing of wildlife. They're actually pretty easy to find. You don't necessarily have to know the territory super well in order to find them. You just pretty much got to travel all over the place around the park, and I guarantee you that you will find a bit of wildlife. In fact, my favorite national park to photograph wildlife in is Yellowstone National Park. There's a lot of elk, bison, bears, all sorts of different wildlife, even wolves that you can capture, and that's where I've actually captured most of my wildlife shots, is in the park of Yellowstone. It's an absolutely amazing park, and there's just an unlimited amount of wildlife that you can find almost every day you're out there. Now do keep in mind, you do have to have a little bit of knowledge about the park and the wildlife in the park. You have to kind of know where the wildlife likes to be in the park, and the way you can find that out is just simply by asking park rangers or anybody like that where you can find certain wildlife and where they like to be around. The great thing about national parks as well is that not only do they have a lot of wildlife, but they also have a lot of great landscapes. You can see right here, this is Lake McDonald, and it's got some very nice mountains in the background. It's a great place not only to take pictures of wildlife, but to take amazing landscapes. So it's a place where you can do a lot of nature, landscape, and wildlife photography, not just one thing. And of course, being in a national park is not just a good experience for you, but if you have family or stuff like that that want to go on trips as well, it's a great place to travel for the whole family. It's a good opportunity for you to take pictures, and it's also a great opportunity to see some amazing nature and landscapes as well. Even so, national parks aren't the only place where you can find some decent wildlife. Wildlife refuges are actually a great place to capture wildlife as well. Although they may not be as pretty in terms of landscape and nature as places like Glacier National Park, they are still roaming full of wildlife. In Arizona, around where I live, about an hour away from Tucson, I can drive down near Mexico where there's a wildlife refuge, and I'm able to capture a lot of great pictures of birds of prey down there that I would otherwise not be able to even see, much less capture with a short lens like this. Most of the time to capture birds of prey like this you have to have a huge Nikon prime lens, like a 600mm lens, but in the wildlife refuge they're used to people being around, and there's just so many of them that it's just easy to find them, and they're a lot easier to capture. And you're still able to capture them in their wild setting, in their wildlife habitat. Another great place to get creative with your wildlife photography, not only get creative but also to practice your wildlife photography, is in public zoos. Zoos are a place where you can definitely practice for your wildlife photography, for actually going out there in the real area and capturing wildlife in their natural habitat, and it's also a good opportunity to take pictures of animals that you would otherwise not be able to see. Most of us can't travel to places like Africa or South America where they find things like lions, elephants, or camels and things like that. It's just impossible for some of us to see animals like that. And in zoos allow us the opportunity to take pictures of these animals without having to pay a lot of money to travel to those places. Now remember, wildlife photography is one of the hardest forms of photography to get into. Almost all wildlife is camera shy and will not get close to you if it senses you're around. That's why it's extremely difficult to get good at wildlife photography and to get decent pictures with wildlife photography. So once you start out, don't feel bad if you can't if you don't capture a good wildlife picture on, say, a trip to Yellowstone or National Park. It happens. It's really all about, it's just as much about luck as it is about skill. You have to be able to find the wildlife, and of course you have to get lucky and have the wildlife roam and find you as well. So it's about being patient, and it's also about luck and skill, all of those combined. And it's really difficult, of course, to get into wildlife photography, but it's definitely something you can accomplish if you have the patience and perseverance to push through and work as hard as you can. And I guarantee you, if you try and you continue to persevere in wildlife photography and you don't give up, you will be able to take decent pictures of wildlife.